Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving headfirst into a seriously dark, yet absolutely fascinating chapter of documented history. We'll be looking at how fiercely guarded intelligence secrets can suddenly just burst into the public eye. And more importantly, how those very real cover-ups can kind of act like rocket fuel for some incredibly expansive theories about how the world really works.
Now, just to clear the air right off the bat, no, we are definitely not talking about the toy. We're talking about Klaus Barbie, the notorious Gestapo chief known all over the world as the Butcher of Lyon for his horrific crimes in France. The big question we're tackling today is this: why on earth did the U.S. Justice Department suddenly have to launch an investigation into whether American agencies actively protected and even employed this guy?
Let's get right into Part 1, the Klaus Barbie Investigation.
To really wrap our heads around this, we got to go back to a rather stunning announcement in 1983. The Justice Department launched a comprehensive investigation to figure out if the U.S. government actually helped Klaus Barbie after World War II. And what's wild here is how incredibly reluctant they were at first. Honestly, the DOJ wanted absolutely nothing to do with it. They figured stuff that happened almost 40 years prior wouldn't lead to any prosecutions. But the sheer amount of undeniable evidence pointing to the U.S. intelligence community made it literally impossible to ignore.
Which brings us to Part 2. Aided by U.S. intelligence?
Let's walk through the shocking paper trail that backed the government into a corner. This whole timeline was first blown wide open by Charles Allen Jr. in an exclusive investigative series for the Jewish Telegraphic Agency, or JTA. State Department documents showed Barbie was first used by the U.S. Army's Counterintelligence Corps back in 1947. By 48, he was actually getting paid as an informer. Then, right around late 49 and early 50, he gets help escaping Europe completely, eventually landing Bolivian citizenship by 1952.
The JTA expose didn't pull any punches. They pointed fingers at some massively powerful organizations, accusing them of helping Barbie dodge justice. We're talking documents suggesting the U.S. Army, CIC, the Vatican, the International Red Cross, and even the CIA were all mixed up in using Barbie's services and orchestrating his escape to Latin America. And once he got there, he supposedly worked as a consultant for right-wing military dictatorships. Just incredible stuff.
But if you want a detail that perfectly captures the depth of this collaboration, look at this number: $1,700. That is the monthly salary the CIC was secretly paying Barbie back in 1948. And this wasn't some wild rumor either. It was completely corroborated by Dr. Erhard Dabringhaus, a faculty member at Wayne State University who actually served as Barbie's CIC case officer at the time.
The contrast here is honestly just jarring. On one side, you have Klaus Barbie, a condemned war criminal sentenced to death in absentia in France for murdering French resistance leader Jean Moulin and deporting French Jews. On the flip side, you've got his alias, Klaus Altman. Operating under that fake name, he was allegedly handed a temporary CIA travel document. According to U.S. Immigration Service files and witness accounts, this alias let a condemned war criminal casually stroll through U.S. cities like Miami, New Orleans, and San Francisco without anyone batting an eye.
Moving right along to Part 3, pressure to uncover truth.
So, remember how we said the Justice Department really didn't want to investigate? What finally tipped the scales? Well, it was a massive, undeniable wave of public and political pressure. That explosive JTA series was the spark, and it was quickly backed up by networks like NBC TV News. The media firestorm got so intense that 9 U.S. congressmen sent a letter, drafted by Representative William Layman, straight to President Reagan, basically demanding action. Ultimately, pressure from the White House, specifically from the National Security Advisor, practically forced the Attorney General to have the Office of Special Investigations launch a full-blown probe. They just couldn't hide from it anymore.
So, what happens next? Let's get into Part 4, broader claims of collusion. Here's the thing. When documented, verified intelligence secrets, like the shocking reality of the Barbie case, finally hit the light of day, they often become launching pads for much grander, unverified theories about global control. And that perfectly tees up a book by Henry Makow, which takes this concept of elite alliances and extrapolates it into a massive, global conspiracy theory. Now, just to be crystal clear, we are impartially reporting on the claims made in this text so we can understand the narrative. We are absolutely not endorsing these viewpoints as historical facts.
So, Makow's core thesis is basically that major historical events, they don't just happen by accident. Instead, his text claims they are meticulously staged and managed by a shadowy, satanic cult known as the Illuminati. According to the book, this group is made up of Kabbalistic bankers and Freemasons who secretly pull the strings on world finances, media, and governments, treating elected leaders like nothing more than puppets.
Which leads us straight into Part 5, the Illuminati conspiracy theory. Sticking strictly to what the source text alleges about the orchestration of World War II, the book makes an incredibly bold claim. I'm just going to read this directly to you. Hitler was sponsored by the banker oligarchy and may have been their pawn. Certainly the Nazis received millions of dollars from New York and London. So Mako is asserting here that the Nazi war machine wasn't some independent political movement, but an actual project secretly funded by international bankers to achieve their own specific goals.
The book throws out some very specific, highly controversial allegations to back this up. For instance, it claims that figures like James P. Warburg, the son of a Federal Reserve founder, acted as a pipeline to funnel $34 million from Wall Street straight to the Nazis. It points to corporate collusion, too, like the German cartel IG Farben teaming up with America's Standard Oil. At the end of the day, the text argues that these financial cartels literally orchestrated world wars just to bankrupt and weaken nations, controlling both sides of the chessboard to consolidate global power.
Taking it a step further, and again, we're neutrally reporting what the text says here, there's this highly provocative assertion. The bottom line is that both Nazism and Zionism were sponsored by the same banking cartel and had complementary goals. The author claims that these elite bankers manipulated geopolitical movements across the entire spectrum, basically using competing ideologies as tools to spark conflict and totally reshape the global order.
This theory really leaves no stone unturned, and virtually no one is untouched. Makaw's text claims this conspiracy ropes in leaders from across the entire political landscape. It frames iconic Allied heroes, we're talking Winston Churchill, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and even modern political dynasties like the Bush family, as witting or unwitting agents of this Illuminati agenda. It implies that all the public opposition between these famous figures, just a theatrical ruse for the masses.
Let's wrap things up in Part 6, Evaluating Hidden Histories. Let's bring all of this together. We've just looked at a 100% verified, documented historical cover-up, right alongside an expansive, macro-level conspiracy theory. So how did these two worlds collide? Well, as our sources point out, the American press actually reported pretty early on about the realities of Nazi totalitarianism. The public wasn't totally in the dark about the atrocities as they were happening. But on the flip side, covert actions, like the U.S. counterintelligence corps secretly employing a known war criminal like Klaus Barbie, those stayed buried for decades. It creates this massive, glaring gap between the official public narrative and the hidden realities behind the scenes.
Which leaves us with one final, pretty heavy question for you to take away from this explainer today. When verified documented secrets, like the U.S. government actively aiding the butcher of Lyon, are finally dragged into the light, how does that profound betrayal of public trust shape our vulnerability to grand, unverified conspiracy theories? When we know for a fact that history has been hidden from us, does it make it that much harder to separate fact from fiction in our modern world? Let that sink in for a bit. Thanks so much for joining this explainer.